Now, it is determined by changes in the prices that the typical urban consumer pays for a representative basket of goods and services. I want to go back to that part where it says the typical urban consumer. Why don't they take rural consumers? Because for us who live in the rural areas, our products need to be delivered. So what is automatically added to our prices? Of course, the transport. So when they do the inflation rate and determine what it is, they focus on urban products. Now, what it also mentioned is that it is goods and services. So if I speak of a representative basket, there is a picture of the basket, but that is only a representation of the food section. If you look at the second bullet, it says approximately 1,500 items are included in an imaginary basket. Yes, such as groceries, clothing, transport, and there's a few others. And one thing I'd also like to bring to your attention is that electricity is also added to this. So when they determine the inflation rate, they bring all of this into consideration. Note, however, it does not mean, say for instance, I'll take one of the items in the basket. Let's take chips. We all love Simba. Now, if I take Simba's price today and tomorrow, it will maybe show an increase, or from 1 month to the next. Maybe the increase is 20 cents or 30 cents. And then I take clothing items. Now, the increase in clothing items will definitely not be 30 cents. So when we look at the inflation rate, it is not to say that every item in that basket increased with the same amount. So, very important, they don't increase with the same percentages, but they are all put together. And now I wonder, whom of you can tell me what will then be used as an answer to the inflation rate? Let us see whom of you were right. The inflation rate is calculated monthly. Now, please remember that we're going to use it somewhere else. It is calculated monthly, but averaged and compounded annually. Now there, I've highlighted the word for you, averaged, because in the beginning I said we work with data. And if I speak of the averaged rate, then I'm speaking of the mean. So yes, my data set will be the monthly numbers, and then I find the mean or the average for my yearly inflation rate. So you can see already what are all the possible calculations you must be able to do. The next one, it says compounded annually. I wonder if you are aware that that sounds very familiar, because we've learned of simple interest and we've learned of compound interest, and now they are saying that inflation rate is compounded annually. Yes, of course I can use the compound interest formula to calculate the inflation rate. So now once again, there's the formula that I spoke of that you are definitely going to have to use and know as well. Then the next one, the inflation rate represents an average price increase. Remember what I said? The clothing items and the Simba cannot increase with the same number. But what they do is they take 1,500 different items and they find the mean of those items. And that's what we get from Statistics South Africa. And what is it currently? 5.9%. Right. So now you already get a bigger picture. Where does inflation come into our papers? How must I be able to answer it? Now, the next one, what I want to show you, is now a graph representing the data. Because what must you be able to do? And this is especially paper 2 type of question. Interpreting the data on a graph. There is the graph. South Africa's average annual inflation rate from 1982 to 2011. Now, if I look at that, it shows you the annual inflation rate over a period of 28 years. Remember what I said. What is a typical question they love to ask in a paper 2 question? What tendency do you notice? Or what is the trend of the inflation? Are you able to answer me in a full sentence? And please don't say it goes up or it goes down. A balloon which is inflated goes up. But if I'm working with paper 2, people, it is very important that you use good language to express what you see is happening. I can start and see that, yes, I can see the graph goes up and down. But you mustn't write in a question paper, in your answers, it goes up and down. If I see that in the graph the values go down, the correct terminology is the values decrease. Please write it down and go practice your formulation of your sentences. The value decrease. And in this case, it is the inflation rate that decrease. So don't just write in your sentences, it goes up and it goes down. Be specific. The inflation rate decreases. And best yet is to add a value. Yes, then I can look at my graph and I see sometimes the graph goes up. But remember, I don't write the graph goes up. What do I say? I say that the inflation rate increases. Once again, write it down. Go practice it in your formulation of your sentences. So if I look at the overall tendency of this graph, I can see that the inflation rate has from 86, look at the value of 86, where it was almost 19%, which is extremely high for a country's inflation. And then it gradually came down with a few fluctuations up to 2004, where it was at its lowest. Now there are already two possible questions. When was the inflation at its highest? Or when was the inflation at its lowest? And then you can see that it then maybe started increasing. Up to 2010, it decreased. Now I wonder which big event happened in 2010 to ensure that there was a lot of money in our country, which brought down the inflation. I wonder if you know, or whether you can remember. Of course, the soccer of 2010, the World Cup that was hosted. So can you see, good things that happen in our country bring in lots of money. And if the money comes into our country, what happens? The inflation comes down. There I can see it, the positive effect that it had on our country. And then gradually after that, what do I notice? It started to increase again. And as I say, now we know it is 5,9. So there is a possible question. Looking at the graph, interpreting what is happening in the graph, writing good sentences, using the correct terminology, and very important, add values. If I say in 2010 the inflation was very low, then I must be able to say, oh, it was approximately 4,1 or 4,2%. So in your answers, good in language, write the words of the things that you are working with, and then add values. That shows that you understand what you are working with and that you have interpreted the question. Right. Something I also want you to remember is when we look at a graph overall, please make sure that you understand what is represented by your x-axis and what is represented by your y-axis. Because when I write my sentences, I must be able to say that in 2010, I've used my value of my x-axis and I've used the value of my y-axis. So I said 2010, it was about 4,1 or 2, and it was 4,1 or 2% in the year 2010. So use your axes as references.